Okay, so the last little bit on this section on evolution. We're talking about how evolution, populations actually do evolve. This is where we will get a little bit into the theory behind Hardy-Weinberg, which is then explained in further detail in my Hardy-Weinberg explanation video. So population is simply a group of individuals of the same species living in the same place at the same time. Okay, this is something, you learned way back in the day in seventh grade with Mrs. Albert. A species is a group of population whose individuals can interbreed and produce fertile offspring. This whole fertile offspring thing is pretty stinking important. Okay, without fertile offspring, there's really not much that we have going on. Okay, it's not its own species. So population genetic focuses on populations as evolutionary units and tracks the genetic makeup of populations over time. This is really connecting Darwin's theory of natural selection with genetics within an individual population. So the gene pool, it's a total collection of genes in a population at any one time, and this is the focus of population evolution. Of course, whenever I see gene pool, I think of the Lion King when Scar says that he was always at the shallow end of the gene pool when it came to brawn. Microevolution is a change in the relative frequencies of alleles in a gene pool. So micro meaning small, so we're looking at evolution really on a very small scale here within an individual population. Macroevolution, that's the fall of dinosaurs and the rise of mammals. Okay, that's macroevolution when you're looking at major evolutionary changes. So we do have variations within a population. You guys are very familiar with that already. Humans have variations within a population. Even your dogs have variation within a population. Keep in mind that although we do have different breeds, dogs are all one species. They may produce funny looking puppies, but if you made a Great Dane and a Chihuahua, puppies will happen. Okay, so keep in mind, not all variation is heritable. Okay, you can get some changes that are due to environmental factors, or so I shouldn't say some changes, some differences that are due to environmental factors. Only the genetic component of variation is relevant to natural selection. So a population is said to be polymorphic, poly meaning many, morph meaning form, if a characteristic has two or more forms that are present in noticeable numbers. Again, we're not looking at the random weird mutation that at this point has not made a huge way into the population. Okay. Source of genetic variation, mutations and sexual recombination. So mutations produce genetic variation, and they are changes in the DNA of an organism. Sexual recombination is our shuffling of alleles during meiosis. Remember, we talked about how, each of you have one chromosome from mom and one chromosome from dad, but then when you produce your own gametes, it's not that your gametes all have then one from one of everything from your mom and one of everything from your dad, but there's combinations, and then you have crossing over, which leads to even greater genetic diversity. So testing for evolution is the Hardy-Weinberg equation. So the premise is this: in a non-evolving population, the shuffling of alleles that accompany sexual reproduction does not alter the genetic makeup of the population. Basically, proportions will remain the same. If you're not evolving, the number of blue-eyed versus brown-eyed people in the population remains the same. If you're not evolving, the number of black bunny rabbits versus white bunny rabbits stays the same. Now, we have some equations here. I actually took them out of your notes and I put them more on this page here. Your two equations, P plus Q equals 1. P is the frequency of the dominant allele. That dominant allele, in this case, I'm talking, your big letter. Okay, we're going to call it A, for example. And then Q is the recessive allele, and we'll call that little a. Now, this one down here, P squared plus 2PQ plus Q squared, this is basically the FOIL method. Okay, so P squared is homozygous dominance, that's big. Okay, heterozygotes is 2PQ, that's big little. And then your homozygous recessive are little. Luckily for you guys, you all don't actually have to memorize that equation this year. You can count your lucky stars. Now, in order for Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium to hold true, you have to have this: a very large population that is isolated from any other populations. Mutations do not alter the gene pool. So if a mutation occurs, it does not cause a phenotypic change. Remember, mutations can occur that do not lead to an amino acid change, right? Because that wobble position in the third. Or even it might lead to an amino acid change, but if it's still hydrophobic versus hydrophilic, it's not going to alter the tertiary folding of the protein. Mating is entirely random, and all individuals are equal in reproductive success. Here's the thing: Hardy-Weinberg never happens in real life, okay? Ever. So if you have evolution, you will have evolution if you have the following: your population is very small. Okay, your population is not isolated, so you have migration in and out of it. Mutations do alter the gene pool. Mating is non-random. We know that the majority of the time mating is non-random, and we also are very well aware of the fact that not all individuals have reproductive success. Okay, so we use the equation, know that in real life it never actually happens. So populations that do not follow Hardy-Weinberg have undergone microevolution, which is a change in relative frequency of alleles in a gene pool. Our possible causes here are genetic drift, gene flow, and then, of course, natural selection. So genetic drift is a change in the gene pool of a small population due to chance. So if you look here at generation 1, okay, you end up killing off, 5 of the plants are the only ones that actually leave offspring. Okay, and then the next generation, only 2 of the plants are actually able to leave offspring, and that results in going from a mixed population of red and white flowers to a population of exclusively red flowers. Again, this is chance. This means that it's not happening because bees are more likely to pollinate the red flower. It is not happening because the herbivore that comes along prefers the taste of the white flower. This is simply a loss or gain of individuals exclusively due to chance. Now, you can also have the bottleneck effect, and this results from an event or a disaster that drastically reduces the population size. Okay, elephant seals were hunted almost to extinction in the 1890s because of that. There is very little genetic diversity within the population. Okay, the bottleneck effect, this is an event or a disaster. You can also have something called a founder's effect, and that's simply if your founding population is very small. That's what happens in your Ashkenazim Jewish population, your Amish population, where it's very religiously segregated, and therefore if you have, so I'm going to take the Ashkenazim Jewish population, Tay-Sachs, a terrible disease. It kills usually by the age of 4. It's very prevalent in the Ashkenazim population. One of the people who originally founded the religion carried the trait. Okay, and because you're not allowed to marry outside of the religion, it has become very pervasive within the religion. So endangered species have reduced chance of variation because we have low genetic variability, and then the problem here is we continue to alter their environment. If there are fewer variations, it's less likely that the species will survive a major change. This is also an issue when we're looking to mate individuals from, say, for example, zoos or wildlife refuges or something along those lines, that we're trying to mate them in order to increase the population. We really have to do a lot of genetic testing to try to have as diverse individuals as we possibly can actually mating with one another. Oh, I forgot this was later on. The founder effect is a random change in a gene pool that often occurs in the small colony. As I said, you have a few individuals that start a new population. If one of them has this particular mutation, then it is going to be more pervasive within the population. Gene flow is the gain or loss of alleles from a population. This is due to movement of individuals between populations. This can alter frequencies within the population, and it tends to reduce genetic differences between populations. I saw it was a beautiful illustration. My brain is saying National Geographic. I'm pretty sure it was. Oh, this was a few years back, of what we think that the the quote unquote average American will look like in, I think they said it was 150 years. And it had to do with the fact that luckily we are living in an era where racism is, in theory, becoming less pervasive. You have more and more people who are not considering race when they are considering a partner in life. And therefore, you're going to see, skin color not be quite so drastically different, hair color not be quite so drastically different between individuals, as opposed to, well, especially go my grandparents' generation, where you simply did not do things like that. I mean, my grandfather got in trouble for marrying a woman who wasn't Dutch, much less of somebody of a different race. Um, but this is what will happen, though, is you'll see less diversity within the population. Natural selection also contributes to destroying hardy Weinberg. So, this is adaptive evolution, which simply means that the fittest individuals survive and reproduce in greater numbers than those who are less fit. Um, Fitness has different definitions based on the resources and competition. If you're in an area where rainfall is a concern, we'll say drought is a concern, for example, the ability of the camel to have fatty deposits in its hump, which allows it to go an extended period of time without drinking water, is obviously a hugely helpful uh, adaptation, despite the fact that I would hypothesize it probably keeps them warmer in a hot environment, as opposed to in the rainforest where you get plenty of rainfall, but you might want to make sure that you're not overheating. Okay, so it's very different based on the environmental factors and what you're actually competing for. So I can alter a gene pool in three ways. I can stabilize it. Stabilize it means that I favor the intermediate phenotype. This is often something that we see in, say, for example, human skin color. Directional selection, it acts against individuals at one end of the phenotypic extremes. Okay, and then disruptive, it favors both extremes while getting rid of the intermediate phenotype. So this is just a cute little example of little micey here. Okay, we have varying shades of fur color. The first one is directional selection. You're taking an original population that had far more of the lighter phenotypes, and the population is evolving to favor the darker phenotypes for whatever reason. You have then B is disruptive selection, so it actually is better to either be much lighter or much darker, and we get rid of that intermediate phenotype, or we have a stabilizing selection where we get rid of those outliers and we really go towards the intermediate. And that is that. Sorry, I have to be smarter than the computer. I'm going to discard them. There we go.